As a child, there were just certain unwritten rules about the types of foods on my plate that were and were not allowed to mix. So for breakfast, the eggs under no circumstances can mix with the syrup. Now, the eggs could mix with the hash browns, but the hash browns could not mix with the pancakes. For dinner, the gravy, it could mix with the mashed potatoes, but the gravy could not mix with anything else, unless it was Thanksgiving. Then it could mix with the turkey. And it was almost as if growing up, I needed different compartments for each item of food. I think when it comes to living out our faith, we can treat certain aspects of our lives similarly. We can put aspects of our life in different compartments when in actuality, they're supposed to mix. And let me explain what I mean. As we continue to look at our theme of humility in our relationships, I'm going to read a passage from Philippians 2, verse 5. It simply says this: in your relationships with one another, have the same attitude that Christ had. Now, right before that, there's a conflict Paul is addressing. And he's laying out the important virtues of getting along. But he doesn't stop there. He immediately goes to the cross and he says, consider Christ, who gave up everything, who left heaven, who sacrificed himself for you, and have this same mindset. And so I think what Paul is telling us here is that when it comes to living out our faith, there are no separate components. In other words, the message of the cross and all that entails is meant to directly impact our relationships. And to the degree that these qualities intermix within our faith will be the degree in which we are exhibiting humility in our relationships. Right? It's interesting in addressing conflict and trying to cultivate humility, Paul doesn't say, hey people, you really need to start getting along better. Instead, he goes straight to the nature of Christ's sacrifice in his leaving heaven for our benefit. In other words, the key to living humbly and selflessly with one another is to be inherently aware of how humbly and selflessly Christ acted towards us. Right? Paul keeps bringing us back to the cross all throughout the New Testament when he's addressing interpersonal relationships. You see, the cross levels the playing field. It reminds us that ultimately of how sinful we are and our deep need that necessitated Christ coming to suffer and die. But at the same time, it lifts us up because it says, wow, these are the unfathomable depths in which we are loved, independent of anything we deserved. Now, as we live in this tension, it can't help but radically alter how we relate to one another. In other words, Paul doesn't do with his faith what I did with my food, right? The cross isn't meant to be in one compartment and then my relationships in another. They're meant to be mixed together. So I want to leave you with something to think about. Who in your life are you currently having difficulty living in harmony with? And I think what Paul is telling you and me is this, that the fresher the vision of the cross, and as we grasp the lengths Christ went to live in harmony with us, that can't help but impact how we see others. And so I would encourage you to meditate on this whole passage, Philippians 2, verses 1 through 11.